Welcome, everybody, to episode 18 of the Arch City Poker Podcast. My name is Tony, alongside Nick. And Nick, how are we doing today, sir?
Doing great. Excited for another episode.
Absolutely. All right, if you didn't catch last week's episode, you can go ahead and check it on YouTube or go to archcitypoker.com, where we have lots of live low stakes, no limit Texas Hold'em, and pot limit Omaha content for you to consume. If you became a member, you would gain access to our custom built learning management system that has tons of videos that do much more deep dives and much more intricate information on the topics that are discussed here in the podcast, as well as just so many more that we haven't even touched yet. So, Nick, today we're going to be talking about lies that live low stakes players tell themselves, and I happen to feel a lot of these. A lot of these that we're going to be talking about today were things that maybe I felt, maybe some people that I know have felt in the past for live low stakes poker, and I think it's just going to really, it's going to be involved with people, the way they think about the game, the way they feel about the game, maybe how they're tilting, maybe they're running good, running bad, but these things people traditionally have felt at one time or another. So, Nick, the first one we're going to talk about is, am I calling because it makes sense, or am I just like tired of folding, right? Because I think we've all been there, which is maybe you've been card dead for an extremely long amount of time within a specific session, and maybe you finally got queens or an overpair. Let's not be too specific. And you have an overpair, and the villain in the hand is basically giving you every reason why you need to be folding this hand, but you've folded for the last 4 hours, and maybe you're just, surely they can't have it, right? I'm sick of folding. So, Nick, it's almost more of a mental game at some point, but if somebody is maybe been carded for a long time, maybe finally hit their flush, or finally hit a straight, or finally hit a pair, or finally hit two pair, and it's the best thing they've seen in 5 hours, how in the world are they supposed to have the mental discipline to recognize if they still need to fold that hand?
It gets easier with time. In repetition. Each hand is, relatively speaking, independent from each other. It's like the person that goes to the roulette table and they see that the screen says it's been black 8 straight times, so like red must hit this next time, when the odds are still the same for it to be black or red every single time they spin that wheel. Obviously, roulette's a lot different in poker, but this example, I think, showcases kind of what we're talking about here. So I actually saw a hand today where a guy, he turns a set, river brings in a 4-liner to a straight, and it brings in front door flush. And when he got checked to, I could tell that like he was visibly perturbed by the river, and I could tell that he really wanted to, he was debating between check back and bet, and he actually bet small, which I thought made a ton of sense because like the way the hand was played, I thought his opponent could have top pair, and so it felt like a bet really small but bet fold spot. And a lot of people will implement, or not a lot of people, like some people will implement the thin value bet, but they won't implement the second and most important part, which is the fold if they face a raise. And the point of this story is that like he had been kind of on a roller coaster ride from what I noticed today in the session. And I think it just kind of boiled over to where he was like, man, like not again. Like, have I really run? Like, I can't have run into a flush again. You could tell he was thinking about that. Like, it's like, what are the odds of like running into this kind of hand again? And the odds were 100% because nobody's check jamming river without having it in those games, unless they're a known maniacal player or known pro, like, which is 1% of the people that play those games. So, yeah, he ended up calling it off. The guy showed him the flush. It's pretty obvious. And so, yeah, Tony, I just think it is tough. Like I think it's one of those concepts where you have like humans just kind of think irrationally, if you will. And yeah, they think like, well, we've kind of talked about this before we even fired this up, guys. Like, yeah, if you get 13 pocket pairs in a row and you haven't hit a set on all 13, it's like, well, man, it's like got to be coming on this 14th one. Like the math will all work itself out in the long run. But the most important thing is, Tony and I always talk about this. You need to do your best to play each hand separately from the others. And it doesn't mean that you can't use prior information as far as like player profiling, recent history in a session or previous sessions, if you will. But it's really important that you separate one hand from another. You find the best line in each hand by ranging your opponent, simply put, and then taking action based on how your hand, obviously your hand's relationship with your opponent's range. And yeah, it's easier said than done, like we said, but I do think with more repetitions, the more numb you become to the results, the more that you can train yourself to understand that it's about the process and not the short-term results. It's about the process that leads to good long-term results. That all will help you with your discipline, your patience, and your mental game overall.
Yeah, I know for something that's kind of close to that question, which is something that I know I felt a lot, which is like if I've been card dead for an extended period of time and I finally get a hand like, I don't know, King Jack suited, which when you're card dead feels like aces. And if I open that hand, let's say it's under the gun to $15 and it gets 3-bet to 45 by, it doesn't really matter what the villain is. At live low stakes, that's more often than not a fold. And honestly, it could be debatable if I should have even opened that hand, depending on the type of table that I'm at. So from under the gun, I mean. So it's a lot of just reflection of like, it almost doesn't matter that you're card dead. What matters is like, can you play this hand that you were dealt as effectively as possible? And you don't think about the session as a whole or the sessions, sometimes plural, if it's happened multiple times or a week or a month. You take each hand individually and you say, all right, we're going to play this hand to the best of our ability. And we're going to get King Jack suited. And we're going to first, look at the table and say, okay, is the table 3-betting a lot? Is the table cold calling a lot? Am I going to get a lot of folds? What do I have to worry about here? How deep is everybody's stacks? And then you can make the decision instead of just saying, oh my gosh, I finally got 2 face cards and they're suited. We're going to run with it. But that was a lesson that it took me a long time to learn, which is like, it does not matter. And what matters is how I play this specific hand in this moment, not what happened the previous hand or the previous month or the previous 10 hands. Just focusing on the one hand that you're involved with, and then you move on to the next one. And it doesn't matter. Like you said, if I haven't flopped a set in 50 hands, 50 times I've gotten a pocket pair and I finally get like pocket threes under the gun, I'm not opening it. That's just not, more often than not in the games I play in, that's just not an open that I should be making. And if it is, it's kind of a form of tilt. It's just, so there's a lot of mental game of poker that I think is really hard. And I think for live low stakes players, they probably feel that urge or tendency to want to play hands that look strong just because they haven't played a hand in maybe an hour or 2 hours. And then King 10 comes along and you're like, well, it's better than the last 2 hours of hands I've gotten. Let's go. So, Nick, the next one we're going to talk about is when people think like, do my blockers matter here? Or do blockers matter here? So kind of like thinking to yourself that if you have ace king and somebody is 4-betting or 5-betting or just shoves on you, and you're thinking to yourself, well, I block aces and kings, they surely can't have aces and kings, which is technically it's a good thought. It's common sense, and it probably impacts the likelihood of somebody having those hands. But in live low stakes, Nick, when people are taking such extravagant lines and they're really kind of self-identifying what their hand is to you, and you're thinking to yourself, but I blocked the hand that they're saying that they're doing this with. How should a live low stakes player interact with the information that's given to them when maybe their studying has told them something to the effect of, well, I have ace king. How can they have aces in this spot?
Yeah, overall blockers, I think they're way overvalued, if you will, in live low stakes games, mainly because the concept of blockers it ties into more of the nuance of GTO, right? Your opponent needs to be able to have a bluffing range in spots for your blockers really to matter all that much. I'm not saying that blockers don't have their place as far as kind of helping you. I would say dot your I's and cross your T's, if you will. There's certain spots where if it's close for me, it might play a little bit of a role. But again, I think my opponent would have to have the capability of being able to play some poker, as Tony and I allude to. Like sometimes, like, can they actually play poker? Meaning, like, are they capable of not being a complete nit or having like zero balance in a spot? So yeah, like if you guys, let's say like you 3-bet ace king and you get 4-bet in a 1-3 game, uh, it doesn't matter that we block aces and kings. Like they just have that hand. Like there are other cards in the deck that still make those hands possible. So I think with blockers, like understanding like when your opponent's frequencies are way off, and that's why like we said, like, we pride ourselves on trying to play like max exploitative poker, trying to range our opponents and then take actions, whether it's checking or betting or raising, sizings. Like we try to take actions that exploit our opponents to the fullest. But that's why it is good to understand, at least on some level, like a baseline of GTO, just because it gives you, like a strategy, like a baseline to fall back on if you did move up in stakes and you are playing against better opponents. But more importantly, like I'm glad I know it so well just because I see where my opponents are deviating from what is optimal. And then I know how to counter them. I know how to exploit them. And one of those spots is when your opponents show incredible strength after you have shown incredible strength. And we would refer to it often as like let's say you have like a pre-flop raise. Like we'll keep this really simple, guys. We'll say you have a pre-flop raise that's primary aggression. Then you have like a 3-bet secondary aggression. Well, once you get into like that tertiary aggression, like the 3-bets pre-flop, especially post-flop, like 3-bets post-flop, guys, river check raises, like all these things we're kind of just saying tongue in cheek here. Those are actions that I'll hear players that are very GTO driven, or they've had a lot of training with like other training sites, or they've watched like a lot of YouTube videos. And I'm not saying they're not wrong about this stuff in theory, but this is where a lot of players do go wrong and they light their money on fire, because in the live low stakes games, none of that matters in practice. Like your opponents, there's just certain spots where they always have it, or there could be other spots where they almost never have it. And it's pretty easy to tell a lot of the time. But yeah, blockers, I would say, Tony, very overrated concept and only needed in rare occasions to kind of help make some decisions.
Yeah, that makes sense. One way I've kind of like always thought about trying not to overcomplicate things, because I think that happens a lot too. Like the more you know can be a burden depending on the type of game that you're in. And you want to take into account player tendencies a little bit more than theory at live low stakes, right? Because GTO is fantastic, assuming that the player that you're in the hands against are playing GTO. And it helps you identify strategies that can win and adjust accordingly. At live low stakes, when people 4-bet, I would say 9 times out of 10, it is not a bluff. It is a legitimate hand. And it doesn't matter if I have kings or queens or jacks. More often than not, it's going to be aces, because people just don't 4-bet often enough. And the one time that you maybe have queens and you're maybe somebody that doesn't like to fold such strong hands, really take into account what action is in front of you. And think of it also in this common thing that Nick says, but they're giving you an opportunity to play perfect poker, because they're not 4-betting also with ace-5 suited and 6-7 suited. It's only aces. So if you can identify that within a player tendency, it doesn't matter what your other cards are. At higher stakes, when people are a little wider, you'll often see, especially on like YouTube vlogs, like people never fold kings because people open a 3-bet and a 4-bet so wide that you are losing money to be folding kings. And the occasional time you run into aces, it's whatever, because you know they can also be doing that with other hands. At live low stakes, my goodness, that nobody 4-bets or more often enough with hands outside of aces. The only other hand is kings, because I won't even see people 4-bet with ace king. So it's either aces or kings. And if you have kings, it's probably aces. So just like little things that help you just kind of dumb down the game a little bit and just make it easier for yourself. Because like if you're on archcitypoker.com and maybe you've talked to Nick or you've talked to myself, and we can do a deep dive on a variety of hands for somebody. And I'm guilty of this, Nick, and you tell me all the time, but like I overcomplicate and overthink all my hands, especially at live low stakes, because if there's no 2-5 or higher available and we're playing 1-2, 1-3, thinking about a million different things for somebody's action. And it's like, cut all that stuff out and let's look at who's doing the action. What do we know about this person?
Yeah.
Because it's not balanced. It's not them being tricky or creative. They're trying to tell me what they have, and I need to listen. So
Yeah, and keep in mind, guys, like, if we're talking about like potentially specific players or having a large enough sample size, just always fall back on like what you think an average or a player would do on average in that type of game. Like if it's like a 1-3 game and you don't know the person, just assume that, yeah, like they're never bluffing when they like 3-bet post flop, or they are, when they're check calling down, they're not balanced at all. Like those are things that you can take to the bank with these types of opponents. But yeah, Tony, just want to make sure they understand that like we're not going to know every single player that well. But if you do play in a room where you're a regular and you play with a bunch of regulars, then of course, yeah, player profiling and knowing specifics about your opponents, like that's going to help you further exploit them. So that would be great. Yeah.
yeah, I actually have maybe kind of an example. So I went to Vegas this past weekend and played in a lot of different games, a lot of different rooms, and everybody was an unknown to me. So one of the examples was, I think we're playing in a 1-3 game, me and some of my friends, and somebody opens from the cutoff to, I think they opened to $20. And again, we're going to assume I don't know anything about this person. And I wake up in the big blind with jacks, and we're going to go heads up basically. And this player, from what I saw, was on the tighter side, but I don't like, for me personally, I don't like cold calling the $20 open with jacks. I think people can be opening a little bit wider from that spot. So in my head, I think a 3-bet is a little bit mandatory, but we're not super deep either. I think in that 1-3 game, we're maybe $250 effective. We're not super deep. So I don't want to make it 80 or 100 like maybe I will do against a deeper stack. So I actually just went slightly above a min click. I went about $45 just because I if the player is tight, they're not going to call with aces and kings. They're going to call with all their kind of crap, more or less, right? Their ace 10 suited, their ace queen suited. But they're going to tell me what they have if they re-raise. And sure enough, it wasn't just a re-raise, but they shipped it. So that just gave me like an easy opportunity to fold my hand. And I'm sure there's maybe a more optimal way to maybe play Jackson if you fold, but I didn't know anything about the player. So I took a line that I thought was going to give me the information I needed to play effectively. And I thought it worked out fairly well. And I don't min click raise very often, but when stacks are a little bit more shallow and my hand's just a little too strong just to fold because I don't know who the villain is, it was a spot I took. And I think despite losing the hand, I think it gave me the information that I was kind of looking for. So, and then Nick, you can chop me up for maybe making that play later, but
no, I think it's fine. I think it makes sense. I mean, you can call, but I think when you have an opportunity to, like, when you believe you may be ahead of their range or it's close, but you get the added info of like defining their range, and if you know they're never going to 4-bet bluff, then I think it makes sense to get more aggressive in that spot. But I would never fault a student for 3-betting small or calling. I do agree with you that going large doesn't make any sense because you're already shallow enough, and if he does ship it, it's just really inefficient to go something like in the box like 60 to 80. Mm-hmm. So no, I think it's fine. Yeah, I mean, obviously easy fold to his 4-bet.
Yep, we folded, and he flipped over aces, and just how people like to do, like you don't mess with me kind of thing. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, so Nick, the next question, the thing we're going to talk about is kind of like when a draw bricks out, and you kind of say to yourself, maybe you thought he had a draw, and he maybe bombs the river, and you're trying to decide whether or not you should make a call here with your hand. And this question's kind of merged, Nick, with kind of hero calling or trying to bluff catch a little bit. But when draws brick and people still bomb it, the live low stakes player often thinks to themselves that they missed their draw and the villain's bluffing. And I think that's a really common misconception for live low stakes players in general, because I think Well, Nick, what do you think? I think people know what I think. I want to know what you think. Well, what do live low stakes players, when they make that mistake, like, do you know why they maybe do that, or maybe what's going through their head, or through all the students you have had? What is their kind of thought process when they're being barreled, when draws are bricking at live low stakes?
I mean, I don't know. I think in a vacuum, players just don't like to be bluffed. And so they just get kind of naturally curious. I mean, context will matter. If you are facing an opponent that has triple barreled, then they probably didn't miss their draw. They probably just have it. That's a very underbluff line, for example. But if you have, let's say, somebody that like, or let's say you don't know them. Let's stick with like the narrative of like maybe you don't have the sample size and like it is more of an unknown. Let's say they bet flop, but then they check back turn and it's a dynamic board, and then they bomb river when nothing changes. Like that's a different story. Like there's probably a good opportunity to do some bluff catching there. But yeah, I mean, these games, you're not going to make the majority of your profit by bluff catching, generally speaking. Now you can catch some bluffs, but they're going to be it's going to be typically when your opponent's line is pretty transparently, or like their range is transparently empty, or like their size, like they give sizing tells, like if there's small sizings in there that don't make a lot of sense, they probably can be a little bit more empty or capped. But yeah, like if typically speaking, or kind of like, I don't know, I would say on average, if you are facing an incredibly large wager relative to the pot, like pot or more, like overbets are typically way under bluffed by the majority of the low stakes population. And then, like I said, like frequency or like barreling is something where like triple barrels are typically very under bluffed. But yeah, I think in general, if we're just talking about it from like I don't know if it's like mental game, but yeah, I think honestly, players just don't like to be bluffed. Like a lot of them, like they just feel like it's embarrassing to get bluffed. Like they just want to have the info. They want to see it. And you hear all the time, like players will say like, I'm like pretty sure you got me, but I have to see it. And then they put the money in, and then they get shown the made hand. And so it happens every day. I see it every day. But yeah, I just think players are naturally curious. And I would just say, just understand, like, again, range your opponent, understand like what's really going on in the hand, and like, are they capped or uncapped? Like, have they shown credible strength? Have they shown weakness? And then like, there's some delayed strength that doesn't make sense. Like, context will matter when we're getting into the weeds of this particular question.
Yeah. And I would even go back kind of like how the last question was, which is like also reflecting on player profile types and personalities, and maybe what action you've seen from that player previous to that hand example that you're a part of. I see, Nick, a lot of people who bluff love to show their bluffs when they're successful. Like, love it. They'll flip their hand over to get the oohs and the ahs, feel good about their play. But overall, I think you're exactly right. I think when draws brick out, and you have maybe like a middling pocket pair that can turn into a bluff catcher and somebody still bombs it, I think you need some pretty strong evidence to call in a way that it's a profitable call. Like, maybe somebody has played every hand and it doesn't matter what the board is, and they're betting every street, and this is no exception. There's nothing that's deviated from their playing path. And you're like, okay, like, this clearly is a call. Not just because of what your hand is, but maybe for the last, because this has happened to me, I think, Nick, I told you about it. I think it was like a really deep 5-10 game. And there was someone who was intoxicated and barreling and betting every single street. And I think I called with queens on an ace high board, and they ended up having ace X, and I got, stacked for a lot of money. And I was really reflecting back on that hand, and it's like, well, I'm bluff catching this villain, but for the 2 hours that I was playing with them, I mean, they were betting every street, every hand, like hardly ever folding. So in the moment, maybe it's still not a correct play, but it felt like if there was ever an opportunity to bluff catch, that might have been it, Nick. But I think you said something that's really important that I want to double back on. And there's also a very much of an ego thing taking place there. And that's going to go right into the next question, which is when somebody thinks that they're better than the game that they're playing in, but they're not winning, that can really mess with somebody mentally and really kind of mess with their ability to play strong hands. Like, for example, if they're being dealt pretty strong hands, they're taking aggressive lines, and they're just being met with a ton of aggression as well in a game that maybe they think they should be winning in, how does somebody interact with that thought or that feeling? Maybe they were an Arch City Poker member and they went from a losing live low stakes player to a winning live low stakes player. And they're still playing in the same stakes, but they've kind of just upgraded with their level of skill within the games they play in. And they're at a table where they know people and everybody's really bad, but they are just losing and they can't seem to get a W for the day. What can you tell that live low stakes player that thinks that they should be winning, but they're not?
Well, keep in mind sample size first and foremost. You could play like very well for weeks in live low stakes or in live poker period, and just not see the results work out as you think they should. You could also be playing very poorly and have amazing results. There's a guy right now. I, of course, will not mention his name, but there's a guy in our room, Tony, right now that over the last 7 days, maybe 10, but like 7 to 10 days, and I don't know if it's that many sessions, like, but it's something like basically like 7 sessions. This guy's played primarily 1-3, and he's up north of like 10K. And to be candid, he's not good at all. Like, I mean, like playing horrifically. So it's, I've seen both sides of it. Like, I've seen obviously that example, like a mega fish just crushing the game over a very short period of time, of course. I've seen the other end of it where, um, somebody that I know is better than the population on average just seems like they're just not getting the cards they need when they have like good hands, or their opponents are just one upping them. Like they have just a little bit of a nuttier hand than they have. Biggest thing is sample size. The other part of it is you start to get like a little deeper into like feelings of entitlement. Nobody's like, you're never really entitled to a pot. Like you're very rarely ever have 100% equity in a pot. Um, so you have to keep in mind that it is still a form of gambling, even if we talked about last episode, like kind of we're gambling with an edge, like we're making plus EV decisions, but it doesn't mean you are guaranteed or entitled to anything. Um, so, like if I definitely have had students before where they've gone through like downswings, and it always comes back to me for all these guys pretty much that they probably were underestimating, or they probably were overestimating like how well they were actually playing during that stretch. There's almost always like some kind of leaks going on or some form of tilt that whether there's bias or not, like they're not accounting for it enough. And that's typically the case. Like, and I think also at the same time, like I've talked with Tony about this before, guys, like that when a lot of you guys go on these like sun runs or these white hot upswings, um, like for the majority of players in the low stakes games, like it's probably just going to be the cards a lot of the time. Like I'm not saying that you guys aren't making some good plays or taking some good lines, but I think there's often too much credit given to the player when things are going well, and then there's way too much like blame for whether it's variance. Usually, could be the deck, could be a certain player or dealer. Like irrationally, you see players all the time. They're like, I just can't win with this dealer. I can't beat this guy. And yeah, sometimes it is just variance, but a lot of times it's like if you're letting things like that mentally get to you, then it probably is affecting your game on some level. So, I would say like you need a large enough sample size, but you also need to be, it kind of goes back to like the first question, what we talked about in the beginning of this episode, guys. Like you just mentally have to have it each hand. Like no matter how bad the last hand was before the results were the bad beat, like you've got to get in the mindset that if you're properly rolled It does not matter. It is one long session in your life, and one hand out of all the hands you're going to play is just a not even a drop in the bucket. Like it's like a microscopic drop, if you will. And so you got to get that into your head that one hand does not matter. Do not let it ruin the next hand. Don't let it ruin the rest of the session or the rest of the week. You got to keep your wits about you or whatever. And so, yeah, Tony, I just think it's a lot of players just get too caught up in recency bias, or it's just focused too much on short term results. It's about, again, the process, and it is easier said than done, but you got to drill that home and you got to understand that.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of really good topics here. And I want to highlight also, like, everybody probably associates variance with like running bad or losing a hand, but there's positive variance as well. And that's something to the effect of like, maybe you're just hitting every hand and it almost doesn't matter. I hear people say this at the card table all the time, like that you're running hot, you're hot today, or that person moves and everybody wants to see change to where that person was because they think that they're gonna be banking all the same stuff and that kind of mentality. And I think the common misconception that live low stakes players tell themselves is going to be thinking that they can, like, they're not going to have losing sessions because they're better than the games that they're playing in. Like, if Phil, I'm going to make this is a dramatic example. If Phil Ivey comes to play 1-3, he will not win every hand that he's playing in. He may not even win every session that he plays in. Now, he's properly rolled for it, and I'm sure he's going to smash some faces in. But variance is going to have him lose to somebody that he's not supposed to lose to. And it's like that for even somebody who's exceptionally skilled at 1-2 or 1-3, or maybe you're playing with a group of people that you know you're better than and things just aren't working out. I think if you're going to be a successful poker player, your ego has to be like checked at the door. Like, you can have an ego in your free time with your friends and family who like can absorb that side of you, but on the felt at the table in that moment, it's just like Nick said, it's playing every hand to the best of your ability and utilizing all the information and all the skills and all the tools in your tool belt to make the best informed decision popular. And one thing that I've seen people do, Nick, is when they're at a table and they maybe think that they're better than the players at the table, they don't want a table change. Maybe it's because of a pride thing, maybe it's because of an ego thing, but Nick, when we're talking about lies that live low stakes players tell themselves, one lie is that they can turn like any game into a profitable game. And that might be true to some context, but if they're at a table, let's pretend this is a dramatic example, but if you're at a table with the equivalent of like 10 a.m. table that opens up for the first time in the morning, and like the 6-7 regulars come sit down and get their coffee and they have their newspaper and they have their weekend stories to tell each other, you might be better than that game. That certainly doesn't mean that it's profitable. And Nick, when it comes to table changing, you and I are certainly not shy at table changing just to to identify a game that's profitable. But why is table changing so important? And if somebody's not doing it, maybe because they think it doesn't matter what table that they're at, they can beat it, why would we want to change that mentality that they have?
I mean, if you guys care about your bottom line at all, you're going to want to table change properly. I mean, I think we're always looking for, generally speaking, like the most amount of action, like a game where you're going to be able to beat the rake, like low stakes. If you're in a higher rake environment, that's going to matter a lot. So yeah, Tony's right. Like, don't let your ego get in the way. Like, don't think like just because you're not, let's say maybe you're not beating like a few specific players that you can crush, and you're like, well, I got to stay here and like get the best of them, or maybe, or like, if this game's tighter or nitty or whatever, or weak, I can, I'm going to be the action. I'm going to make the game better. Like, that's, I mean, whatever. Maybe you can, but it's not really necessary. Like, if you have a room where you have multiple tables spread, like you don't need to put that much effort and ego into it. You can just move and find a better game. I will say something that I was thinking about while Tony was asking this question, guys, and it's something that I think is important for me to point out, is that, like, for example, there's a running joke in my room that I've been a regular in forever that, I move all the time. They'll ask me if it's kind of like a running joke that I'm in the transfer portal or I'm like on the world tour, and I sometimes maybe sit at all 4 or 5 tables in the day that might be going. Maybe more than that sometimes on rare occasions, but I do try to be mindful of the clientele and the people that I want to keep um like the most happy, if you will. And what I mean by that is, like, let's say I do table change and I'm going to a game where there's more action. Well, typically speaking, like if you play in a room or a city that's not really transient, like it meaning like you don't have a lot of people kind of in and out from all over, like you would maybe with Vegas, or maybe somewhat more like in Florida or Texas. But like if you are in a place where you are more reg heavy, and you still have those places in those states as well, you might be playing with a lot of the same regs all the time because they're the ones that give the action and they're the ones that maybe make for a better game. What I do though is when I do get to those tables, and we talk about seat selection being as important as table selection, but you got to keep in mind that if you're always like hunting for that table, or and where I'm going with this is more specifically like the best seat, or trying to get to like the left of somebody that you know is going to be the one that can like probably punt you the money. You do need to be mindful of that and like not be like such a bum hunter, because even like the most I'm trying to think of the word, like not like dumb's not the right word, but like somebody that's just not, it's late at night, guys, I'm trying to think of the word, but like kind of like somebody that's not paying as much attention, like even those guys are going to notice that you're always trying to get to the left, or you're always recruiting them to come to your table. Like
Yeah.
there's a few regulars even in my room that will do this, where they're like, hey, come sit in this game. And like that person that's being recruited knows why they're being recruited. So you do have to be really mindful that like do things that will keep them like they'll you kind of throwing them a bone, like keeping them happy. Like don't always try to get to their left. Don't always try to recruit them to their table. If they don't like you, for example, like I had a table 2 days ago, Tony, that three of the people act like this is very rare when this happens, but they kind of like passive aggressively said they don't love me sitting down because they don't want to see a straddle on. And I've been like straddling a lot recently. And I said, I said, do you guys not love that? And like somebody finally spoke up and they're like, I actually don't. And it was somebody that I knew was going to be good for the game. And I said, then I said that I'm not doing it. And so I didn't straddle. And today I had the opposite, Tony, where the guy we were talking about before we fired this up, one of our faves, he says, hey, Felipe, straddle. And I'm under the gun. And I don't under the gun straddle typically unless the table does. And I said, I got you. And I'm putting in gun straddles for like the next 3 hours, just because like that's the guy that I want to keep happy. I want to make the game fun and make it, obviously I want it to be more profitable for me, but you want to cater to your clientele a little bit. You want the regs to be happy, because if nobody's there, like if people aren't there having a good time and feeling like they can at least play some level of comfortable poker, then they're going to start not coming in as often. And like that makes it really toxic, and that's not a great environment. So yeah, I know we're kind of on a little bit of a tangent there, Tony, but it's still pretty related. Like, yes, we want to table select well, guys. You don't want your ego to get in the way. You want to find a game that's obviously more profitable, and like I said, don't let your ego get in the way of that. But do keep in mind, don't let your ego also get in the way of like trying to always like kind of bum hunt and seat select for the best seat. It's not that important. Like you want to keep the others happy on some level. So it's very important that you understand that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I know there's almost like two actions. The act of table changing is one, and then the act of seat changing at that table is like the cherry on top that can really make somebody upset. And what I've learned is that if there's a table that's going off, and there's a lot of the time, Nick, there's actually a list to get to that table. What'll end up happening is I like to just get there and then kind of like just be happy to be part of the game versus like trying to figure out where I want to sit. I'm actually fine if whoever's to my right, I'm actually fine if there's some people that are willing to gamble a little bit and let me either on my left. And that's just fine because it helps make them feel more comfortable, especially I have the kind of notoriety of being more of an aggressive player myself. So people will almost always ask for a seat change button when I sit down. But if I just sit immediately to their left, no, their right, excuse me, their level of comfort, I don't see them asking for seat change buttons. They're a little more talkative, even with me. They don't think like I'm out to get them because they have position on me. So they do hold an advantage when we sit down together. And sometimes it's just little things like that. It's like, okay, if you want to be part of the game, also don't ruin the game. Not everybody has to put that much attention to detail into the table that they're table changing to. More often than not, if you're in a bigger room, it's going to be a bunch of unknowns, and you can just kind of navigate based off of like who you know and how the table flows and how the action's flowing. But if you frequent a card room as often as maybe Nick and I do, and there's so much of the repetitiveness of who's going to be there, there is a certain level of responsibility to like not play, not to like act. Oh yeah, almost like in a form of aggression, almost. But Nick, I think that covered like a lot of the topics, and I think that again, these are just things that live low stakes players tell themselves or think about that might be hindering their game or really stopping them from their ability to win as much as maybe they're possible or maybe could win. And Nick, any final thoughts on the topic?
No, I think we covered it well. I'll mention real quick, guys, if you missed the previous episode, if you're interested in playing with Tony and I, you can come to Hollywood Columbus. They are running their quarterly series where it's the quarterly 100K. 4 or 5, I believe, like kind of flagship tournaments they're running during those series, but it's March 8th to March 15th. So we should be around. If you're a reg, you already will say hi to us and try to get the seat change button to go to our left. If you're not, then come in and say hi and enjoy some fun tournaments during the time of March there. So, but yeah, Tony, that's all I got for tonight.
Absolutely. That's going to wrap up episode 18 of the Arch City Poker podcast. If you're brand new to the channel, go ahead and check out archcitypoker.com. Again, we have tons of great No Limit Texas Hold'em and Pot Limit Omaha content for you to consume. And this is your first time in the video in the channel on YouTube, leave a comment, let us know what you thought, or visit our Discord channel. Give us a hand history, talk to us, ask us any questions, or give us feedback. We'd love to discuss anything in the poker world with you, and you just got to show up. So again, thank you everybody for watching, and again, we'll see you next week for episode 19. Thanks everybody.